I'm gonna give you a 4-step plan to set up your next fat loss diet. Step by step, we're gonna create a clear plan of what your diet should look like to burn all your belly fat and to get a flat stomach. And the best part is that you're not gonna have to count or restrict a single calorie. You're not gonna have to weigh your food or follow any other numbers or quantity-based approach that's super restrictive and unsustainable. Plus, those approaches don't address the root cause of weight gain to begin with, and it does not work for y'all's busy schedule because it is so time-consuming. I've customized hundreds of nutrition plans at this point, and I have a very clear system as to what works after helping many career-driven men all around the world lose their belly fat, get a flat stomach, and fully optimizing their health with a plan that is both sustainable and works for their busy schedule. So let's begin with step number 1. Step number 1 is to identify the goal. How much weight are you looking to lose and how much belly fat do you actually have? Because the more belly fat you have, the bigger your weight loss goal is, the more metabolically unhealthy you are, unfortunately. But luckily this can be reversed and it can be addressed. It's not something that can't change. And metabolic health is a fancy term, but I'm gonna break it down very simply for you. Your metabolic health is really dictated by 2 things. Number 1 is how fast do you burn the fuel that comes into your body, and 2, how do you respond to specific fuel sources when it actually comes in? Do you have a slow metabolism or do you have a fast metabolism? Do you burn energy very quickly or not very quickly at all? And secondly, when fuel does come into your body, depending on what that fuel source looks like, can it be stored as body fat right away or can it be used for energy the moment it comes in? In particular, this is very important for carbohydrates. Depending on what type of carbohydrates come in and how metabolically healthy or unhealthy you are, that could be the difference between you either storing that fuel, those carbohydrates, as body fat or using it for fuel right away. The amount of muscle mass that you have also makes a very big difference in this as well. So to summarize this in a simple way, the more body fat you have, the bigger your weight loss goal is, the more metabolically unhealthy you are, and metabolic health is really dictated by 2 things. 1, how fast you're burning energy, and number 2, how do you actually respond to that energy when it comes into the body. So if I have 2 people, one is James, who has a body fat percentage of 6%, who's 19 years old. Obviously, I could give him 200 grams of sugar and he can instantly burn right through it because he has a very low body fat percentage. He has a lot of muscle mass. He's very metabolically healthy. He can respond to that fuel very well, even if the fuel source is not on point. And then we have John over here. If your name's John, don't get offended. It's just an example. Now, if we take the exact opposite, someone that's looking to lose north of 100 pounds, has a lot of belly fat, and doesn't have that much muscle mass either, if I were to give John the exact same thing, those 200 grams of sugar, he would not respond the same way because his metabolism is much slower, he has a lot more in the way of body fat that he's looking to lose, his muscle mass is lower, and he's more metabolically unhealthy. Even if I were to give him some naturally sourced carbohydrates from fruit, he could potentially even store that as body fat as well. Because whenever you have more in the way of body fat, you are suffering from a condition known as what's called hyperinsulinemia. I'm going to say it again, hyperinsulinemia, which is a fancy term for insulin staying elevated for far too long. You're spiking insulin over and over and over, and the longer that this hormone stays elevated for, the more likely you are to store body fat. And that's what actually causes insulin resistance. Too much of anything is a bad thing, and too much of anything in the human body does lead to resistance, therefore creating insulin resistance. So based on all that, you want to see where you fall in the spectrum, because if you don't have a clear idea of where your current status of metabolic health falls and how you would be responding to different fuel sources, to naturally sourced and processed sources of carbohydrates, depending on that, you're gonna have no clue what you're doing when you do customize a meal plan, because you may customize this fancy, cool looking plan with all these different meals, but if it's not actually addressing the root cause of why you have this body fat to begin with and your current state of metabolic health, it may not even work to begin with. So that's why you have to address that first. Where do you fall in the spectrum? Are you closer to James, who has a body fat percentage of 6%, or do you have a body fat percentage that's north of 20% with a little bit more belly fat, less muscle mass, and a slower metabolism? So step number 2, you want to identify your macros and your carbs. You don't want to identify the exact number and get meticulous with it like you would with counting calories. You just want to find the right ratio, or in other words, the right macro split diet that works for you in your current status of metabolic health. If you're someone like James, you can go with whatever macro split you want. But if you're someone that has a little bit more in the way of body fat, more belly fat, you're gonna have to be a little bit more cautious with your carbohydrate intake in particular and your macros in terms of how much fat and how much protein you're eating. So no matter where you fall on the spectrum, if you're looking to lose belly fat to begin with, you want to eat more in the way of fat. Because like we talked about earlier, insulin is the ultimate predictor of how much body fat you're either gonna gain or lose. That's what it's responsible for, storing fat. But fat does not stimulate, does not cause an insulin response when you actually consume it. So if I were to eat a whole stick of butter, I would not see a response from insulin at all whatsoever. So my likelihood of storing body fat would be 0%. Of course, none of you guys are gonna eat a whole stick of butter, but whenever you consume fat, even though it has 9 calories per 1 gram of fat, it does not matter because you're not spiking that hormone. Now, protein will help you get a good insulin response. It will raise it, but it will come back down just as fast as it comes up, which is what we want. We just don't want it to stay elevated for hours. A spike in insulin is not always a bad thing as long as it returns to baseline, as long as it returns to normal. It's a building block macronutrient. It does play a very big role in helping you build and grow more muscle. So anytime we experience any sort of growth, even if it's not more in the way of fat, we will see insulin go up. So it's not always bad to see insulin spiked as long as it doesn't stay spiked. That's why no matter where you fall on the spectrum, you want to be getting more animal foods into your diet. If anything, making sure that your fat to protein ratio is close to 1-to-1. So for every 1 gram of protein that you consume, you also include 1 gram of fat. So instead of getting the low fat cheese, for example, you would get the full fat cheese at the grocery store, making sure that that protein to fat ratio is about even 1-to-1. Now with carbs, that's when it gets a little bit more specific and customized to you, right? Where do you fall on this spectrum? If you're someone that's just looking to lose 10 to 15 pounds or a small amount of belly fat, you can get away with eating more in the way of carbs from a natural source, right? But if you're someone that's looking to lose north of 50 pounds, you have a higher body fat percentage, lower levels of muscle mass, and more belly fat, you want to at least start in the beginning with a protein fat focused diet and keep your carbohydrate notch, right, somewhat low, keeping it around 100 to 150 grams until you lose your first 10 to 20 pounds, and then you can start to scale it back up. This is exactly what I did for Chris, who was looking to lose north of 50 pounds at the time. So we had to start slow. We did the same thing, 1-to-1 fat to protein ratio, and with a carbohydrate range of 100 to 150 grams of carbs per day, but it was only coming from a natural source. So that way we were stacking all the odds in his favor to get a good or no insulin response every single time he ate, so he was not in a position to store fat at all whatsoever, right? And then once he started to lose weight, we started to reintroduce and add carbohydrates back in. He went from 236 to 200 pounds in 3.5 months, and now he's at 183, and he does not even need to work with me anymore. He now has a plan that he can follow indefinitely, eating much more in the way of carbohydrates, but still losing more weight. But if he would have just started off eating 500 grams of carbohydrates per day when he was at 236, that wouldn't have made sense for him because he was already suffering from what we went. Another example for you as well, Hollis, he started at around 265 and he has now lost north of 50 pounds in a span of 6 months, and he just focused on nutrition. We didn't even customize a workout program for him. And he was also traveling all across Europe, so he was a very, very busy guy. He was constantly traveling. But when applying this approach, we did the same thing, very similar. He had a little bit higher of a carbohydrate range, a little bit past 150 grams for him because he was moving around and we want to make sure his diet was somewhat flexible. but we still made sure that his diet was mainly fat and protein focused. And then once we started to lose more and more in the way of body fat, we started to bump up his carbohydrate intake more and more. And now he's eating more carbs once again and still able to sustain his weight loss, right? Even though he lost so much weight in a short period of time, he was able to sustain that while traveling, while managing his busy schedule, and while eating more in the way of carbs without having to track, count, or restrict a single calorie. So if you're already interested in how we can customize something very similar to you, all my links are going to be down in the video description, a link to fill out a form to work with me directly, the link to my Instagram, as well as a transformation overview of these transformations and a playlist going over the videos of these guys talking about their experience working with me. So to sum this step up for step number 2, you just want to see where you fall on this line of metabolic health. Are you closer to the metabolically healthy side or metabolically unhealthy side? And then depending on that, does your diet need to be mainly fat and protein focused for now and then reintroduce carbohydrates back in? Or can you start off with eating north of 200 grams of carbohydrates like the person who's looking to lose 15 pounds would, and then keep on scaling from there? Because if you are in that position, you definitely can get away with eating more in the way of carbs as long as they're fully natural and they're not coming from a processed source like processed sugar or any processed carbs that would spike insulin and keep it elevated for a long period of time. So now that you have a really good understanding of what your current status of metabolic health is based off how much weight you're looking to lose, and you understand what your macros, specifically what your carb intake should look like based off of that, now we can start to customize the specific meals that you can eat on a daily basis. So what I want you to do is to get out a pen and a piece of paper, or even just the notes app on your phone, and type out your 5 favorite meat options, animal food options, right? And then your 5 favorite vegetables and 5 favorite fruits. Let's say if you're looking to lose less than 15 pounds and just a small amount of belly fat, then once again, you can get away with eating the higher fructose fruit on that list, right? Maybe even some dates, some pears, mangoes, pineapples, etc., right? But if you're looking to lose more in the way of weight, let's say north of 35 pounds, and you have a little bit more in the way of belly fat than the average person, then you want to make sure that those fruits are a little bit lower in fructose, overall fruit sugar to start with. And then you can start to scale the amount of carbs that you're eating and eat more in the way of those sweeter, high fructose fruits as you lose more in the way of body fat. So I made a list for each example, one for the person that's a little bit more metabolically healthy, and one for the person that is not as metabolically healthy, right? We're gonna start with the healthier version, right? Animal protein options and vegetables are gonna be pretty much the same here, but I'll make sure they're different for each one. So the person that has a healthier metabolic rate, to start with, we wanna go with ribeyes, ground beef, 85-15% ground beef, so you get that 1-to-1 fat to protein ratio, salmon, some pork, if you can tolerate it, and then some lamb as well, ground lamb or just traditional lamb chops, right? How can you not go wrong with those foods? All those foods there, you just have to get some butter on the pan and just throw it in. You don't need to get fancy with the preparation as long as you have the seasonings that you want to use. Personally, I just use slap ya mama, Goya, salt, and pepper. That's it. And then for the vegetables, spinach, asparagus, kale, cauliflower, and broccoli. You can even get all of those frozen, so then once again, put some butter on your pan. Always cook your food in butter, by the way. Never cook your food in seed oils so that it does not turn into trans fat. When you do cook those frozen vegetables, it doesn't take any preparation. You just throw it in once the butter is heated up. With the fruits, we can go with some sweeter fruits that are gonna be a little bit higher in terms of the amount of carbs they actually have. So pears, bananas, pineapples, mangoes, and then some raspberries as well if you want to go for a sweeter berry, right? All those fruits there, most of them don't even take that much time to prepare at all whatsoever. If you're a very busy guy, you most likely want to go for your grab-and-go fruits such as your pears, bananas, and your apples. So that way it doesn't take that much in the way of preparation at all. You just grab it and then add it to your meal. If you mix and match each of those 5 options, you can get well north of 15 different meals, well north of 15 different meals. As long as you mix and match it, you can get that wide variety, right? And still eat a diet that is gonna help you lose more in the way of body fat, but still be enjoyable to eat at the same time. And you're not gonna have to restrict your calories at all whatsoever. Now, for the person that is a little bit more metabolically unhealthy, going back to that example, someone that's looking to lose, let's say north of 35 pounds and has more in the way of belly fat than the average person, we keep the animal foods the same, we keep the vegetables the same, but we just change up the fruits, right? But I'll still use different examples for each one. And for the 5 animal food options, we have skirt steak, much higher in fat, right? Number 2 is ground turkey. Number 3 is chicken thighs. Number 4 is sardines, if you can tolerate it. If you're not a big fan of sardines, you can go with mackerel instead. It doesn't taste near as fishy, but it still has that good quality vitamin D and that good quality fat content as well. And then number 5, you can go with eggs. Best to cook them sunny side up so you can really absorb all those really healthy fat-soluble vitamins such as vitamin A, D, E, and K2, otherwise known as choline. And you'll get more in the way of satiety as well because you're able to absorb more of those nutrients too, right? And then with the vegetables, bell peppers, green beans, mushrooms, carrots, or any frozen mixed vegetable option, right? Once again, these are all vegetables that you can get frozen if you want to, and it makes it way easier to actually eat these foods with your busy schedule because you don't have to cut them and take all this time to prepare it. You just put some butter in your pan, throw it in, cook it at somewhat of a high heat, or you can even cook those vegetables along with your animal foods, which I do all the time, beef and broccoli. You can go with chicken and mixed vegetables with carrots and cauliflower. There's all these different combinations that you can go with if you want them to be fully combined. And for the fruit, knowing that we want to go a bit lower in fructose and lower in carbs, for now, I'm gonna start with blueberries, kiwis, oranges, avocados, then some cantaloupe would be another bonus you can throw into. That would really be the only difference between those two, making sure that your fruits are a little bit lower in the way of sugar. You really make sure you watch out for any processed carbohydrates, processed sugars, or seed oils, especially if you're in that situation. Universally, you want to cut those out, but you definitely want to keep an eye on it if you're in that state where you're a little bit more metabolically unhealthy, and you also want to keep your eye on those sweeter fruits and then reintroduce them as you lose more and more in the way of body fat. And the final step, the 4th and final step, is just to take all those foods, like I mentioned earlier, and just mix and match them. If you mix and match all those different foods, you can get well north, once again, of 15 different meals that you can use. And it's very simple, right? You're eating nothing but whole foods, good quality foods that don't put you in a position to store fat, that make you feel fully satiated because they're so nutrient dense. Your likelihood of storing body fat every single time you eat one of these meals is pretty much 0%, and it's addressing the root cause of why you have this belly fat to begin with, reversing it so you can get a flat stomach and drop body fat each and every month as long as you stick to that. And it's enjoyable. Plus, it actually works for your busy schedule. Like Joe, he lost 20 pounds in 2 months, got a flat stomach within 3 months, and he was always on the go. He was really busy. He worked in sales, and he didn't have to waste time counting calories, weighing his food, or following any other numbers or quantity-based approach. We addressed the root cause of why he gained this belly fat, and we reversed it with a diet that fit perfectly for his busy schedule and his busy lifestyle. So to summarize this, if you take action on each one of these steps and you have belly fat right now, and you're currently in a state where your metabolism is slowed down, your energy levels are low, and you're just not feeling very healthy, you can absolutely reverse that and get your health back and get your body back to where you want it to be if you address each one of these steps step by step, just like what we went through today, and apply it to your busy schedule. No matter how busy you are, you can absolutely make this work as long as you're willing to dedicate about 45 minutes to 90 minutes of cooking per week, and you have the commitment to take action on this. So if you want to learn more about how I can actually customize a diet or nutrition plan for you that works for your busy schedule, all my links are going to be down in the video description, just like I mentioned earlier. The form that you can fill out to work with me one-on-one, you can fill that out if you'd like to work with me personally. Our transformation overview, going over our transformations in more detail. A playlist of these guys actually talking about their experience working with me. And if you have a question about any of those things and how I can help you personally, there's going to be a link down below to my Instagram. If you have Instagram, you can click that there and message me. Other than that, that's pretty much it for this video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.